This is Wildcat Country.
Larson tipped it. Love has it. Lewis slams it, and Arizona wins it.
The inside scoop on the Arizona Wildcats.
It's Gunnar Maldonado. He's got blockers. Touchdown, Arizona.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's time to bear down.
Welcome to another edition of Wildcat Country presented by Harrah's Auction Casino. Eric Cohen and Shane Dale. And I mean, what else can you say? This is unbelievable, Shane. In January, I thought the basketball team was done and they made a run to the Sweet 16. And I thought the baseball team was not going to give us anything this year. And now they're in Omaha. You know, college sports can be funny. Sports can be funny in general, but this is an interesting one.
Yeah, we talked, you asked me the question maybe a month ago or a little over a month ago between baseball, softball, and men's tennis, who was most likely to make a deep postseason run.
Yeah.
And I kind of hedged a bit, but I said, I think the team that was most likely to go deep in the postseason was the baseball team.
You did.
The team that was most likely to be eliminated early was the baseball team because of the unpredictable nature of college baseball. So, you could say, well, they got kind of a free pass in Oregon, but and look, you and I had a text exchange while I was at work on Friday. By the third inning of game one, they're down by 8-1 or something like that. They lose that game 18-2, and we're thinking, nice run. Like we said, they played with played with house money. But you know what? Arizona lost a lot of first games in series this year. They're used to it, and they came back and won the series. So I'm sure they didn't get down, but. Amazing, great story with Mason White, getting very emotional after the game, and yesterday the emotion he had even right after that the kind of hit that you dream about as a kid, I'm sure, and it's fun. It's fun. We're almost in the middle of June, Eric, and we're still talking relevant Arizona sports, and that is it. That itself is exciting. Hopefully, they can keep it going for a couple more weeks.
Shane, you want to preview? Speaking of Mason White, you want to preview who we have coming up on the show today?
I would love to. Yeah, we do. We got Mason White. We caught it. We just chatted with him right before we recorded this segment. He was kind enough to join us right in between getting to their hotel in Omaha and then taking a bus out to go practice. So we talked to him in between. It was a quick interview. He wasn't on Wi-Fi, so we apologize for the audio a little bit, but we'll make it work. But big shout out to Mason for taking a chance to join us. And then Joe Healy from D1Baseball, who was there to cover the Arizona North Carolina series. Also a fantastic interview, knows his stuff. If you just want to, if you're a newer fan and you're like, oh, I haven't really paid attention to the baseball team, but now I'm invested, definitely check out this interview because he's got a wealth of information about Arizona, about Coastal Carolina, their first opponent on Friday. And the rest of that side of the bracket and the College World Series in general. So you get kind of like our guy Shotgun Spratling a couple weeks earlier. You'll feel smarter. You'll know a lot more. 20 minutes or 25 minutes, however long it lasted. We could have gone a lot longer after listening to what Joe has to say.
We have a lot to talk about on this week's show. A lot of baseball talk, a lot of other sports talk. We're going to start with baseball. Obviously, middle of the show, baseball. We'll get to some non-baseball things in the last segment of the show. Let's get to buy or sell, Shane. And number one, I don't care what happens in Omaha. All I have to say is, what a team, what a run, what a comeback, and my bad, Chip.
Well, all those things apply certainly, but I think we can tell ourselves we don't care until the game starts on Friday. But I'll sell that portion of it just because, consider who their first opponent is. It's kind of crazy how it worked out to be Coastal Carolina.
Yeah.
And I think it's the first time Coastal has been back to the College World Series since they beat Arizona in the championship series in 2016. So, but yeah, like you said, Arizona's been playing with house money from our perspective. From theirs, no. They still have a job to do, and I'm happy about that. They're not content just to make it. I don't think any team that's there is content to make it, just to make it. But they certainly are playing with house money from our perspective. I think, again, if we're being honest, we didn't think Arizona was going to be here at this point. After they lost game one, we didn't think so. After they fell behind the seventh, I think it was the seventh inning in game two, we didn't. And then after they fell behind in game three, we didn't. And they kept. It reminded me a little bit of the NLCS between the Diamondbacks and Phillies a couple of years ago, where I'm a Diamondbacks fan, and A couple of times I thought, well, good effort, good season, but they're not going to get past the Phillies, and they did. And hopefully Arizona makes it farther than the Diamondbacks did in their World Series. But yeah, it's been a crazier College World Series than or college NCAA baseball postseason than it has been in a long time, and they're usually pretty crazy. Four of the top five seeds are gone. No team that made it to the College World Series last year made it this year. And Murray State, which was the worst seed in their region, makes it just like the fourth time that's ever happened. But Arizona earned it. They're a very stubborn team. As corny as it sounds, that was the epitome of bear down that we saw on Saturday and Sunday. North Carolina made some mistakes, but Arizona still had to capitalize on them, and they did. Smith Bailey pitched well enough to keep Arizona in the game. Mason White did his thing. We'll talk to him about it. And then how about Casey Hinson, Tony Pluta? Both
incredible.
throwing over 50 pitches the day before and coming in. I just assumed they weren't going to be available.
No.
But they came in and shut things down in the eighth and ninth.
In a winner-take-all game, Shane, you suck it up.
I understand. I'm sure that they would have begged to play. I just didn't expect it. Now, the last thing I'll say before I give the microphone back to you is we need to give some credit to Dave Hickey. A lot of us weren't really sure about the Chip Hale hire at the time with his lack of experience at the college level, to put it nicely. But Chip obviously has done a heck of a job. It took a few years, but here we are. So a shout out to Dave for making that hire.
Yeah, and I think that's a great point. Listen, I'm gonna own it. I've owned it, had to own it for a couple weeks, but gonna do it again. I thought the Chip Hale hire was the lazy one. I thought he was hired because he was an alum with no college baseball experience. That was a successful alum, former major league manager. I said, how's this guy going to translate to the college game? And, he won with Jay Johnson's players his first few years. And, they made that kind of fortunate run to the Pac-12 championship game against Oregon. I was there the other year and they lost, but it got them in the tournament, and they obviously lost that one. Last year, they won the Pac-12 and, got to the tournament and at home and didn't do anything. And then, this year, so what did you, we're like, okay, Chip Hale's he's going to get you to the postseason and that's it. And you know what? That's fine. What he has done this postseason and what he did Saturday, Sunday is as unbelievable as any recent Arizona coach in recent memory. You lost 18-2 on Friday. Your team was done. It was embarrassed, Shane, on the national scale against a top 5 team. And you went out and you beat them the next 2 days
D1
on their home field.
D1Baseball's number one team going into the tournament. Yeah.
Number one.
They were outscored 29-16 in that series, and they won 2 out of 3. Just how baseball works. But I'm not going to go complete revisionist history because I certainly had my doubts about Chip Hale as well. But I did know I feel like it's more about players than coaches this time of year. And you look at number 1 seed Vanderbilt, number 2 seed Texas, and the top 2 seeds didn't even make it out of regionals. I think there's just more randomness in baseball than there is in other sports. Now, what happens year after year, you can criticize, and certainly Arizona, Oregon did what Arizona did last year. Oregon was the only team not to win a single game that hosted a regional. But I think over time those things tend to even out. Hopefully, it will with men's basketball as well. So I think the criticism would have been more valid this year if Arizona had fallen flat in regionals again. But I think this time of year more than anything, it comes down to players and whether they execute or not. They know the drill by now. And Arizona, they're a stubborn, pain in the butt team to play against. And like I said, if they could beat North Carolina, they can beat anyone. They're not going to be favored to win the College World Series, but they weren't favored to get out of regionals. They weren't favored to get out of super regionals, and that's only going to fuel them, if anything.
But here's where I'm going to give Chip Hale and Kevin Vance, pitching coach, a lot of credit. They had to maneuver the pieces of the puzzle together on Saturday, Sunday to make that work and to keep a big offense in check. And the fact is, they did. And, you got to give them all the credit in the world for that. I mean, they looked dead in the water. I thought, hey, even if they won on Saturday, great. You and I both predicted North Carolina in 3. So they get to Sunday, and I thought they have no chance to win. I just didn't believe it. And, they're losing. And, Smith Bailey did his part. I said, 6 innings, 3 runs, did his part, something like that. Yeah. And you get the lead. They got a lucky, they threw away the sack bunt. I hope Fryfogel's okay after that. Where he got kind of hit in the head with that errant throw, but they found a way. And
well, now
Hanson flew to a clutch.
you as a Cubs fan, you know all about booting a double play ball in the eighth inning in a clinching situation. But I that was a reference to 2003. But anyway,
Oh, no, Shane. I don't want to acknowledge such evil, cruel Chris. All right, I'm going to give you one here. Okay? Well,
Okay.
let's play the blind resume test.
All right.
Resume A. Okay? 5 seasons, pretty much 5 seasons. I'll explain why. 3 postseason trips, 1 national championship series loss, and 2 overall trips to Omaha. And this team did not play in the conference tournament at all. Resume B. 4 seasons, 4 postseason trips, 3 conference tournament championship game appearances, 2 conference tournament titles, 1 trip to Omaha. That's Jay Johnson was the first. That's Chip Hale was the second. Can we admit that these resumes are closer than a lot of people would?
Pretty similar. Yeah. I mean, well, I think, I still give a slight edge to Jay. I think Chip would get closer if Arizona makes a deeper run in the College World Series. But yeah, if you do a blind test, it's pretty close. Like you said, it's impossible to compare conference tournament resumes because there weren't any back in the day. But back-to-back conference tournament titles and a regular season title the year before, that's 3 out of 4 essentially in 2 different conferences. And look, they finished 4th this year, but like 5 teams were within a game of each other. And now you have the postseason success. So yeah, I think it's certainly at least comparable now. And Chip's out. Look, he's still out there doing work in the meantime. Landed a great transfer pitcher from Western Kentucky already. I'm sure it's not just him, but him and Kevin Vance. But guy deserves a ton of credit. And unlike Jay, he has some deep ties to this program. So you obviously never know for sure, but he certainly seems more likely to stay for the long haul. I still remember the first time that I chatted with him on the podcast because I don't think you were available for that one. I asked him about just about taking the job and his long-term plans, and he said, he said it from the start that this hopefully will be his last job. And now you never know. Coaches say things, but you got the ties here. He's obviously he loves the city of Tucson, so that's the better news is he's less likely to bolt than a guy like Jay Johnson was.
Right. And I think it's interesting. And I think if Chip Hale were to get to the championship series and lose, I think his resume arguably could top Jay Johnson's. Just with the consistency. Now,
Yeah.
Jay Johnson had 1 year. He actually coached 6 years at Arizona, I believe. But 1 year was COVID. They only went 10-5, and then the season ended. So that didn't count. So that's why I wanted to kind of put it apples to apples, complete seasons. But remember, Jay Johnson missed the postseason in 2 out of 5 years.
True.
So a lot of boom or bust.
Yeah.
And Jay Johnson obviously had more talent, I think, in general on his team. But listen, they had a first round pick in Chase Davis. They're going to have one in Summerhill. Got to give Hale some credit there as well.
And that I was thinking back, Jay Johnson when he was there, that there's the hashtag slogan was MLB training ground, and I feel like Chip Hale's really continued that, and he's done a good job of mixing his MLB experience and knowing what it takes to get there with guys who know how to coach at the college level. So I think that's been a good mix for him, and I can't be happy for the guy. I mean, I don't know how many. I wonder if I could ask there's one AI out there probably knows this. How many guys have won a College World Series as a player and as a coach with the same team? I'm sure the answer's out there, but Chip Hale has a chance to add to that list, which is pretty cool.
All right, number 3 here in an abbreviated buy or sell since we have 2 guests on the show. Outside of the women's basketball run to the national championship game in 2021, this is the greatest, most unexpected postseason run by an Arizona Wildcats sports team since then. Buy or sell?
I would also shout out 2022 when the softball team went 8-16 in the Pac-12 and then advanced to the College World Series. That was probably even less likely because number one, there aren't typically as many upsets in softball as there are in baseball. And number two, they were 8-16. They weren't as good as the baseball team had been this season. And it was Caitlin Lowe's first year on the job, and there were some growing pains for sure. But that, 8-16 in the Pac-12, actually, it's kind of like baseball in the SEC now.
Right.
It's still the Pac-12 was the premier softball conference, or one of them anyway. And then to go as an unseeded team and then not only get to the College World Series, but win 5 in a row to get there. I would say that's an even rarer feat in softball than in baseball. So I'm not saying one's better than the other, but if you're saying since then, that would be the one that I would mention.
The other one that I would mention, honestly, and I know it's not necessarily the same on a postseason standpoint, but the Arizona football team winning 7 games in a row. Kind of going, just as far as an unexpected run goes.
Yeah.
7 in a row, including the bowl game against Oklahoma. And I know Oklahoma's missing guys, but I mean, still, you're in the Alamo Bowl. Nobody expected this team to, go from 5-7 to, ranked number 11 in the country at the end of the year. So I'd put that.
That's fair.
I don't know if it's quite at this level because, you're in the final 8. But that football run, along with the softball run, was up there. I mean, we've had some really interesting ones. Notice one omission is men's basketball. Which, maybe this is the year. Maybe this is the year where they'll be seated in the teens and make a run to the Final Four. We'll find out. As always, Wildcat Country is very glad to be sponsored by Harrah's Auction Casino. And why wait for rewards, Wildcat fans? At Harrah's Auction Casino, your play today means free play tomorrow. Sign up for Caesars Rewards, play your favorite slots, and unlock up to $25 in next day free slot play. Plus, your rewards go beyond the casino. Enjoy dining, entertainment, hotel stays, and more at 50-plus destinations nationwide. Bear down, play today, get rewarded tomorrow. Only at Harrah's Auction Casino. Must be 21 or older to gamble. Know when to stop before you start. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-522-4700 or 1-800-NEXT-STEP. Visit the Caesars Rewards Center for details. And by the way, you want a summer getaway just for the weekend? Check out Harrah's Auction Casino in Maricopa. It will be worth your while, and mention Wildcat Country when you do. Coming up next, we have 2 guests for you. Mason White, the star of the baseball heroics this weekend, and of course Joe Healy from D1 Baseball here on Wildcat Country. Shane, the team is in Omaha, and we have the hero of Sunday's Super Regional game, Mason White, the hometown kid, joining us here in Wildcat Country. Mason, 2 outs, 8th inning, bases loaded. What's going through your head as you're facing this new pitcher that comes in the game, down a run?
Yeah, just all the highlights of past Wildcats and their team, so just flashing through my mind, saying this is my opportunity to do it. So let's go out there and do it. And took the approach, and it happened. And I got the first, and I was just so happy and so excited that we took the lead, and because of it.
You mentioned in your post-game interview with ESPN about the opportunity to face Coastal Carolina again, and I remember, I'm sure you remember Arizona being 1 extra base hit away from beating them and winning the championship in 2016. I think you were probably 12 years old at the time, which makes us feel even older. But what do you remember just watching that series? You talked about when they won the championship, when you were getting the T-shirt and being excited. What do you remember from that series, and were you maybe hoping to get a chance to face Coastal in this series?
Yeah, I remember they won the first game, so I knew they had a chance to do it. They just had to go one win in 2 games, and then they ended up getting beaten the second and third game, I'm pretty sure. So it was hard hitting for a 12-year-old to see your hero team lose and win again. And they had the chance to do it, but now getting the opportunity to be back here and being on the scene where it happened against the same team, it's kind of like a word coming to fruition, if you say, it's coming to right in your face. It's like, wow, this is not fake. So it's really cool.
When you get to North Carolina, you lose 18-2 in game 1. Everybody across the country said, the Arizona shouldn't have been here. They played nobody in the region. They're done. You guys go out and win, 10-8 on Saturday. Did you notice the locker room changed after Friday's beatdown, or were you just like, hey, all we got to do is win 2 more. We're good? Yeah,
nothing changed. The game happened. We're fine. Think around. It's we still got 2 more games to win here. We showed up Saturday. It was a mindset. It was an all or nothing type of mindset. We got to get this thing done. So everything buying in, the job is done. Continue playing because we don't want this thing to end. And then once we won, not the Sunday, same mindset. We worked out for us.
You guys have been on the road, Mason, for 4 straight weeks and counting. You've won 10 of your last 11. Everyone, like Eric said, keeps picking against you guys. Coastal is the favorite on Friday already. They've won 23 in a row. How have you guys been able to navigate that and maybe even feed off that, especially in a hostile environment like you experienced at Chapel Hill?
Yeah, we don't really manage the outside noise and all the things people say and whatever people want to talk about or what the odds are. We just go out and play baseball. You can stack all the odds against us. You can put 30,000 people in the stand. You can put us in your hands. You can put us in back together. And we just went back to playing baseball. It's really simple as that.
Yeah, it seems like the teams that make it this far have a special bond off the field as well. And obviously the whole thing with the bananas, which I know Chip Hale still says he doesn't get, but you guys seem to have a lot of fun. Tell us about this team away from the field. What makes you guys a special group?
Yeah, this team's super close. On the bus, it's not quiet. It's a rowdy bus. Just people screaming, just people talking from across the bus. Everyone's talking about something. They're making fun of each other, cracking jokes. So when the game ends, we leave it at the field and we move on, and we're friends off the field. So it's really fun to be a part of this group. It's the closest I've ever been on a team. I'm super close with everybody on this team. It's really fun to be here.
When it comes to what's next, do you guys feel like, hey, it's all a bonus? We've gotten further than most people expected us, or do you really say, all right, we haven't done enough. Our season isn't complete. There's still more to go. What's kind of the mindset in your mind?
Yeah, our motto for the 2025 season starting in January was chasing 5. So we're chasing that full national title for our program. So everything we do is that in the back of our mind. So this is just the next step. It's awesome being here, and this is what our whole goal was. The entire season was to get to Omaha, but obviously there's so many games to play, and that's what we're looking at.
All right, last question for you, Mason. I know you got a tight schedule. I always like to ask student athletes we have on the show, tell us something about yourself away from the game. So away from baseball, hobbies, interests, maybe something that most people might not know about you. Tell us what you like to do when you're not playing.
Oh, okay, yeah. Off season I play golf. That's it though. Just in the 4 weeks I have off, and then during the season I sit in my room and play video games and watch baseball. Which is what I do off the field. It's not very exciting, but sit there and catch up with my friends and hang out.
What are your go-to games at the moment?
I played Fortnite all season. It's basically what I play so far.
Hey, if it's working, keep it up, right? You've made us proud for several years. Keep doing it. We're all rooting for you in Omaha. Thanks so much for taking a few minutes to hang out with Shane and me.
Of course, guys. Thanks for having me.
Discover more Play for All at Harrah's Auction Casino.
Hi, folks. Here are your drinks.
Where having fun means racking up reward credits with the Caesars Rewards loyalty program that can be redeemed for food, free play, hotel stays, and more. Not only here in the city of Maricopa, but also at more than 50 Caesars properties coast to coast. From Harrah's Las Vegas to Caesars Palace in Atlantic City. What are you waiting for? Play for All at Harrah's Auction Casino, the official sponsor of Play.
Joe Healy from D1Baseball joins us. He was out in Chapel Hill this weekend. He got to see an interesting series. We'll put it that way. Joe, 18-2 on Friday. You're thinking, okay, this is going to be a short stay for me here in Chapel Hill. Then what happened? What's your take on what you saw the next 2 days?
Well, one of two things, depending on how you want to look at it. I mean, either the moment started to get a little bit too big for UNC. Sometimes in those moments when there's a specific pressure that comes with playing a super regional at home. It can be really anticipatory after you win the first game. There's a lot of tension in the ballpark if the games are close. So I think that's one. The other is I think Arizona just kind of got its feet under it. And it's hard. The three of us probably feel it more than those 20-year-old kids do. But I mean, they're flying from, Eugene back home to Tucson and then to Chapel Hill. And who could blame them for, coming out a little flat on Friday, right? I mean, it's a hard transition to make, and hitting being contagious like it is, that's a talented UNC team. So I think those are a handful of the potpourri of things that happened to Arizona. Now, in the next couple of days, I would say one of the other things is just that it felt like Arizona was able to get enough going offensively early in the game to continue kind of some sort of momentum. In game one, it was a 1 run, but then UNC comes out and scores 5, and then the momentum just kind of died. They were able to do enough to get into the game a little bit and allow them to get into a rhythm. So, and credit to them, credit to Arizona, because I mean, neither of those wins in games 2 and 3 were what you would call decisive victories. They were come from behind. They were gritty. They took advantage of some mistakes on the part of UNC. It was kind of like a classic, just grind it out type of series win. And, in talking to Chip Hale, and you guys know this, that's kind of what he wants his team to display is that kind of grittiness.
You might say they found a way to bear down. It's of course
Yes,
that is the university motto. And they got out, like I said earlier in the show, they got outscored almost 2-1 in that series, but they found a way to win, and all that's all that matters. Joe, thanks so much for joining us. I know how busy you are this time of year. When Chip Hale joined Arizona, when he was fired or hired rather 4 years ago after Jay Johnson left for LSU, I think there was a lot of mixed feelings from U of A fans. You know, Chip is a legend as a player at Arizona, has a lot of experience at that major league level, but this was his first venture into college baseball. Are you surprised that he's been able to have the success he's had, especially over the last couple of years?
A little bit, and it's not even coming from the standpoint of doubting. Like, obviously, Chip Hale is a well-respected baseball man, right? There, nobody doubts the credentials that he's had, but the college game is just so different. And I had my doubts just from the standpoint of most other examples we've seen of a guy who played in the big leagues, was an alum of the program, but maybe doesn't have coaching experience or has coached in the big leagues or in pro ball and comes over to the college game. One of two things either happens. One is just doesn't go well. See Lance Berkman, Jose Cruz Jr., guys like that, or it's a little bit bumpy and takes some time. I think uh, ASU is an example of that, where they were better this year, but it took them some time to kind of get it right.
A lot of
But
ASU fans still are sold on Willie Bloomquist, but that's a whole
100%.
other discussion.
That was a kind description of the situation, but they were
Yeah.
certainly better this year. That is definitive. But so I think a couple of things that Chip Hale has done well, and I interviewed him right after he took the job. I was at Baseball America at the time, and one thing that struck me there was he was very open about, yeah, I don't really know the college game yet. Like I kind of have my eyes wide open about what I don't know here, so I'm going to lean on guys who have been in this. And so I thought he did a really good job hiring a staff of guys who were college baseball lifers, and he's continued to do so. I think Kevin Vance as the pitching coach is one of the more underrated, inspired hires that's happened in major college baseball recently. So he continues to understand if we're going to have success here, yes, I bring a lot to the table as someone who understands what the development process looks like. I can help out in that way, but I also need guys who just understand the college ecosystem. And that's something that, if I may say so, like Willie Bloomquist, it's taken him a while to get a staff that feels like it has that. He was leaning on his pro contacts a little more. So I think that's like a nice little A and B test there because they were hired basically at the same time. So yes, a little bit just from the standpoint of we've seen this time and again, it doesn't necessarily always go that way. But now that he's in the role, and now that I've seen the team and I've spent a little time talking to him, it makes a lot of sense. I think his demeanor and the way he manages that team with a steady hand, a very professional approach there. I think when you combine that with the coaching staff that understands the college game, I think it's a really good marriage of experience and demeanor and the way they go about things.
Smart and humble enough to realize to know what he doesn't know and maybe realize that. So yeah, no,
Yeah.
definitely. We had him on a couple weeks ago as well, and it's he's great ambassador for university and a pretty good coach too. All right, so let's look ahead to the College World Series. Arizona escaped Chapel Hill despite some very rough starts, to put it nicely, from their top two starting pitchers. Smith Bailey, freshman, turned in a quality start, kept Arizona in the game. Really hard luck loss from Ryan Lynch in that game. But overall, how do you think Arizona's pitching rotation stacks up with the other teams in their side of the bracket? Coastal Carolina has is fantastic 1 through 3. Then you got Louisville and Oregon State as well.
Yeah, I think better than Louisville, certainly. Louisville's 4 out of 4 in that bracket in terms of starting pitching in particular. The other three, it's kind of toss them in a bag, and on a given day, I'll take any. Coastal Carolina is probably the best on paper in that group, but Arizona and Oregon State feel similar in a lot of ways. I will say, in general, in a vacuum, I like Arizona's pitching staff in this ballpark, in this space, more so than I did in Eugene, and more so certainly in Chapel Hill. ACC and SEC ballparks in particular tend to be launching pads at this time of year. And I think we saw that a little bit in game one, less so in the next two games. But when you have Arizona's pitching staff, which is predicated on putting the ball in play, throwing a bunch of strikes, that's a tough matchup when you're in a ballpark like Chapel Hill that's 390 in center and 365s in the gaps and is significantly smaller than High Corbett. Omaha's obviously a little different. It's a bigger ballpark. It's not the graveyard it was when U of A won the title in 2012, and it's probably even more offensive than it was in 2016 when they came really close. But it is still a much bigger ballpark than what they just came from in Chapel Hill. So I think the start that Kramkowski had, actually, I think probably goes quite a bit better. Now, maybe it's a laser show and doesn't go any better, but I think there were some balls that I think probably get played a little bit better in Omaha. Don't leave the park in the way they did in Chapel Hill. Don't leave the park in Omaha. And I think maybe there's a scenario where he settles in a little bit more and Arizona's in that game on Friday instead of it just getting out of hand like 5 minutes after the game started. So I think that the strike throwing and not beating yourself defensively are like the two top things you have to do in Omaha. And I think Arizona's set up to do those things well because they feed off each other, right? You're pitching to contact, your infielders are staying engaged in the game because you're working fast and throwing strikes. And so those things kind of feed on each other. And that sets up well given what they want to do on the mound.
Yeah, I mean that makes perfect sense. Now the thing is though, this team kind of has that underdog mentality because nobody really expected them to get out of Eugene. Let's be honest, they got a good draw there once Oregon lost the first game, and then nobody picked them obviously to beat North Carolina. Would you say already? And I asked Coach Hale this the other year or the other week, and I just mentioned this to Mason White. If you're an Arizona fan, this is a successful season regardless if they go 2-and-barbecue in Omaha, right?
I think so because it continues to set the standard at Arizona that look, maybe we're not, and maybe they'll get there, but we're not the program that's going to be in Omaha every single year, at least not historically. You guys know this better than I do. The kind of history of U of A is you win national titles, but then there's some troughs that you have to build back up from, and that's for whatever reason. And you guys are way more equipped than I to explain that phenomenon, but that's just kind of the way it's been. But I think now you're working on the consistency piece. And so I think, look, Chip Hale has established a floor at the program where it feels like regionals every year is kind of the expectation. And now you've also set the expectation of, look, like, if we go more than a handful of years without being in Omaha, like something probably needs to change at U of A. So I continues to put it put the proof in the pudding, if you will, of when you come here, if you're a freshman, by the time you graduate, we can basically say that you're going to be in a position to go to Omaha by the time you're done here. So I think that's huge. So the floor is really high for where Arizona is at. I think this helps the ceiling. Now the next step for me is since 2016, when Jay Johnson got Arizona back to the College World Series, it didn't quite stack up when it got there. It got there and it pretty quickly you were like, okay, this team is good, but then you put them up against, Mississippi State back in 21, it just comparing the talent and it wasn't the same. So that's kind of the next thing. I'll be interested to see how they match up here. There's obviously not a lot of juggernauts on their very good teams, I should be clear, but not juggernauts on their side of the bracket. It's right there if Arizona plays well. I mean, there's nobody they're going to see in this bracket that's better on paper than North Carolina, and they just took two in their place. So I think you can feel pretty optimistic about that. But to me, that's the next step, is getting Arizona to a point where they'll take on, name your SEC or ACC team, and they look, guy for guy, just as talented as what those teams do.
I think that's awesome. I mean, listen, Brendan Summerhill is going to go in the top 15 in the baseball draft. Mason White's going to go fairly high. I'm sure there are some other guys that are going to go up there. So, yeah, I mean, there's some talent on the team. Talk about Coastal Carolina. What do we know? Obviously, there's a revenge angle from 2016, as Shane mentioned. What do we need to know about the Chanticleers?
So a couple things. One is that this is kind of the reverse of what they've been of late. The book on Coastal last, let's call it 5 to 7 years, has been, man, they can really hit, but the pitching, you're not sure beyond the first top couple of guys what their depth is like. This year's been, I don't want to say totally the opposite because it's still an effective offense, but they're not very physical offensively. Not a lot of home runs, but on the mound, they are excellent. The rotation is three guys who, it's two pros in Morrison and Fluky, and then like a classic fifth-year college starter that's just going to pound the strike zone at 91 miles an hour, that kind of guy. Very solid. They're 4 or 5 deep in the bullpen with guys they really trust, guys that can kind of be interchangeable in their role. And the real X factor for them, he's a very good offensive player, but on the pitching and defense side is their catcher, Caden Bodine, who's arguably the best catcher in the country. And his superpower, if you will, is he's going to steal strikes. So I can guarantee you, if you're an Arizona fan and you see some balls that look like they're off the corner that are getting called strikes, that's the Caden Bodine effect. He's very good at framing. He's very good, for lack of a better way of putting it, at fooling umpires. There's some great, if you searched on Twitter, there's some great graphics of pitches that were called strikes in Caden Bodine games that are just like, there's like a ring around the strike zone of pitches that got called strikes because he's a master of making it look like it's a strike when it's not.
Master manipulator. And for whatever reason it works, including with MLB umpires. I was looking back at what Coastal had starting a pitcher during the postseason, and if they keep go into the same pattern, it's likely going to be fluky against Arizona, which is funny because he actually has the third best ERA on the team as far as starting pitchers, but it's still 3.24 ERA, something like that. Still very good. If it is fluky, what should Wildcat fans know about him?
Yeah, you're going to have to be ready for fastball. I mean, he's got good breaking stuff as well, but it's the fastball really plays up. He and Morrison both are kind of big, tall guys with long levers, and so that ball is going to feel like it's coming out 10 feet from home plate. And so you've got to be ready to time fastball. And again, I think that's, Arizona's a team that's going to hunt fastball. They don't make any bones about that. So Fluky's going to have to be careful with it. But that's kind of it, because if you're not on the fastball, he's just going to abuse you. But if you are on the fastball, then you're going to make him go to something else, and you can kind of eliminate fastball because he's going to have to lean on something else. And that's when you really start to be able to get to him and maybe get him out of the game early, which is going to be important if you're going to get through the bracket, because if you see Coastal again, you're going to want them to be a little more taxed on the mound. So that's the thing, is you're going to have to hit fastball. That's going to be true, even if it's Morrison and they flip it, because that would be the only other guy they would use in that spot.
And Morrison's like the number 2 or 3 pitcher in the country in ERA, I think. Something like that.
Sure is. Yeah. And his stuff is, I think that's just kind of like the old phrase, that's baseball, Susan. Just kind of like his Field of Dreams. Is that a Field of Dreams quote, or is it Bull Durham, perhaps?
That had to be Bull Durham.
Bull Durham. Yeah. They're screaming at their televisions or radios that I had that wrong. But regardless, their stuff is pretty similar. Their seasons have been pretty similar. It's just like the classic fluky baseball stuff, no pun intended, that their ERAs are different. I feel like if you flipped those ERAs, I don't think it would look weird. But yes, Morrison has had a great year in terms of when he's been in trouble, he works out of it, and it's the reason he's the Sun Belt Pitcher of the Year.
So handicapping that side of the bracket, who do you like as of now? I know that could change between now and Friday. We're recording this on Tuesday, but who do you think is best positioned to make it to the championship series?
I think, given the depth of pitching, I think it's Coastal. I just, time and again, we see that's what wins in Omaha. At some point you're going to have to go to somebody you're not totally comfortable with, or just hasn't been in that kind of spot. And Coastal's set up well in two ways as far as that goes. One is that they have enough depth that they may not actually ever get to somebody they're not totally comfortable with. But even if they do, it's probably somebody who's had some success this year. The numbers are the numbers. Like, they're not having to reach for somebody with an 8.5 ERA that hasn't pitched since April 15th. Like, that's not on the table for them. Now, if you're an Arizona fan listening to this, I assume most of you are, the good news about that is you match up pretty well in game one. And suddenly, if you beat Coastal in game one, well, that whole dynamic flips. Like, that's the whole thing in the College World Series, is winning your first game. The percentage is absurd.
Well, you win the first two, then you only have to win one more, versus if you split the first two, then you got to go 3-0 or you're done.
Correct. Yeah. Just the odds get so much more difficult. So you match up well in game one if you're Arizona. Like, yeah, is it going to be easy? No, but nobody is going to be easy to beat here in Omaha. So, but if you do that, you totally flip the dynamic. And I'll admit, like, I don't know if our picks are up on the site, but I picked Coastal out of that bracket. But if you said I can't be Coastal, it's probably Arizona, because they have a lot of the same qualities, right? I really love the bullpen. And I think it's at least the top end guys bullpen, Hintz and Pluta. And I mean, Pluta's probably as fearless a closer as I've seen in a long time, because the stuff is not like blow you away, right? But it's just fearless and a bunch of strikes, and here it comes, and good luck, So I like the bullpen. I like the pitching depth. It doesn't have like the lights out stuff that some of these staffs have, but it's just been super effective. And, I think that, like I said, I think that wins. So you win that opening game if you're the Wildcats, and you feel like you're in pretty good shape.
All right, let's look at the other side of the bracket for a second then. All right, let's say all goes well. The scenario, Arizona beats, let's say they beat Coastal Carolina, they beat Oregon State, and somehow they win another game, and we're going on to the championship series. I mean, you're starting off with an unbelievable matchup in round one with LSU and Arkansas, and then you got Murray State in the other game. They're kind of a throwaway in a lot of people's minds. How would Arizona stack up against those four teams, hypothetically, if they were to make it that far?
The toughest matchup will be Arkansas. To me, that's the best team in this field. They've been the most consistent team that's still in this field. It has to be frustrating for both Arkansas and LSU in a year when we've had so many upsets that those two brackets have held to where it's like, oh, great, another team that could win the national title is our first opponent. So that's not ideal. But to me, the Arkansas is a tougher one. Their lineup is so relentless. There truly is not a break in that lineup, and they can beat you with the home run. They can beat you with the gapper. They can do all the small ball things. They don't do it a ton, but they can. They handle the bat well. They don't really strike out. So they just are so dangerous offensively. And when you want to talk about depth and quality on the mound, I mean, they have guys they don't even really use who come out pumping 98 miles an hour. And look, I know velocity is not everything, but it's a pretty good place to start, right? So they're just their best has been better than anybody else's best. LSU is a step behind for me, and my quick tidbit on that is the lineup doesn't scare me a ton outside of a couple of guys, and I think they get a little bit fly ball happy, and in that ballpark, that can lead to games where you fly out to the warning track a dozen times, and it's the most frustrating thing that could ever happen to you. And I could see that being a thing for LSU because they just don't have that pop they had when Tommy White and Dylan Cruz were in the lineup and all those guys. It's just a different team. But Arkansas is the team that would be the toughest matchup, I think, if it comes to that.
That's fair enough. Last question for you. I gave this to Shane earlier in the show. Now I'm gonna run it by you, Joe. Let's play the blind resume test here. Which resume to you is better? Okay. First one. Coach had 3 postseason trips in 5 years, 2 trips to Omaha among those 3 postseason trips, and a national championship series loss. The other coach, 4 seasons, 4 postseason trips, 1 trip to Omaha, 3 conference tournament championship game appearances, 2 conference tournament championship game wins. I know it's not easy to see on paper. Would you take the first one or would you take the second one?
I'll give you an answer, and then I'd like to guess who these people are.
Okay.
I would take the first one because I just think when you're on the doorstep, even if you lose it, of winning a national title, to me that trumps anything else.
That's fair.
I guess that's where I'm at. But I assume those are Jay Johnson and Chip Hale.
That's correct.
You cracked his code. Yes.
Yes. I mean, you're on an Arizona podcast, so yeah, but it's
of course.
Still, I mean, it's not. I mean, Hale has gained a lot of ground very quickly.
Yeah, it is not a ridiculous question. Like, let me be clear. I'd still go with the high end stuff, but you're right. The consistency there, and that's why I talk about the floor. It's just you could just set your watch to it now, like with what they are, and that does solve a little bit of the riddle that even Jay Johnson couldn't totally crack, right? Like Jay Johnson had years where he didn't make the tournament, much less make a deep run. So, yeah, I think it's an interesting question, and I think for a lot of folks, like the success there has been a little bit unexpected when you consider again, we talked about the track record of guys with his background trying to come to college baseball, and just let's be honest, just thinking, well, I've been in the big leagues, how is this different? Well, it's a different job. It just is.
Yeah, and so your official prediction is Arkansas over Coastal in the championship series?
That's correct.
Okay,
Yep.
Good enough. I'm interested. Last question for you. I'm interested to get your perception of Arizona baseball on a national scale. And you already talked about this a little bit, but I've said that I feel like Arizona baseball is, in terms of what they've done in the postseason historically, is kind of what the Arizona men's basketball is sort of perceived to be. Because Arizona has 1 national championship in men's basketball, 4 Final Fours, which is impressive, but it's not where Arizona is. But in terms of College World Series appearances and championships, they're up there with some of the other top programs across the country, but I don't think they're necessarily thought of that way. And that maybe is because of the program's inconsistency since the Jerry Kindle era. Just as someone from the outside, how do you think Arizona baseball is perceived nationally?
So I think the brand recognition is pretty strong, especially when you consider that one of the obvious comparisons that people are going to make is ASU, obviously. And look, if you're someone who's younger than 3 of us and you're in your 20s, like Arizona's been the more successful of those programs, of late in their lives for the most part, especially since Pat Murphy left ASU. So I will try to curtail my answer here because this is truly, I'm a nerd, college baseball history stuff, and I could probably just filibuster about this because this is so fascinating to me. And my colleague Mike Rooney, who lives in the state of Arizona, has a lot of respect for both the big programs there. We talk about this all the time, that you're right, Shane. Like when you compare Arizona's overall CV to pick your college baseball powerhouse of history, there's a couple that are obviously better. Texas and USC, although most of that history is ancient at this point. But everybody else, they're right there. And yet, I don't think nationally they're thought of in that conversation. And I do think it is because of the dips, right? That they've won 4 national titles, they played for a 5th, they've been in Omaha a bunch of times, but at no point in that history have they been one of the more prominent programs for that stretch of time. They were always overshadowed by an SC or an ASU, or now it's kind of the SEC programs that tend to overshadow everything. And so they've just never had that sustained run where for a decade they were in the mix as a national title contender. I think Jerry Kindle, I think only ever got to 3 tournaments in a row, something like that. And just there's these misses of the tournament that just are like a Swiss cheese in their resume. And so I think
Yeah.
it ends up being a little out of sight, out of mind, right? Like the tournament's more visible than ever. And if you're not involved, people just kind of don't see you. They forget about you. It's not like men's basketball, right? Where it's like even in years when, let's say, Arizona's not particularly good, like they're still on TV every week. You
True.
still see them on ESPN playing Texas Tech now and Kansas.
And that was going to be my point, is that, despite the men's basketball team's lack of postseason success, at least recently, they're still a winning team more often than not. They win a lot of big games. They're a top seed usually in the NCAA tournament. But like you say, those games are always big on ESPN or CBS or whatever. Whereas if you want to watch a regular season baseball game, typically you got to go through ESPN Plus.
Right. Yeah, that visibility difference is huge, and just that the dips for Arizona basketball are, oh boy, we thought we were going to get to the Final Four, and instead we lost in the round of 16.
Yeah.
Versus, hey, we're not even in the tournament and we're sitting at home. That's a pretty big difference too. But I suspect that's changing though. I think the consistency piece is there. I think they're in a good spot in the Big 12. Oh, by the way, where they're not really taking a backseat to anybody in terms of caring about baseball, resources towards baseball, all of that kind of stuff, while also being in a league where everybody cares about baseball, which was not minus maybe Utah. Like, and even they're getting a new stadium. Previously in the Pac-12, that wasn't the case. But they're in a good baseball league where they are honestly could be the team that is kind of the bully of that conference if it continues this way.
Joe, great analysis. Thank you so much for joining us on fairly short notice, and we look forward to having you on again soon. You're an encyclopedia of college baseball knowledge, so we really appreciate it.
I appreciate it, fellas. Happy to do it. I know busy week for everybody, y'all included, so I appreciate you having me on.
I'll tell you, that was a great set of interviews, Shane. And Mason White gave me some confidence. So let's make some predictions. How far, Shane, does Arizona go in Omaha?
All right, so I was putting this together and actually changed my mind a little bit as I was putting it together. So it'll be interesting to see who Coastal's starting pitcher will be on Friday. Like we talked about with Joe, if they stay consistent, it'll be Cameron Flukie. He's been their number one starter in the postseason throughout the postseason so far. He's been very good. He has a 3.24 ERA, not quite as good as the number one is their top two pitchers, but he's been their number one guy so far in the postseason. Either way, Coastal has the best three-man pitching rotation among all College World Series teams. And as Coach Lopez told us last week, it usually comes down to pitching this time of year. The whole tired defense wins championships, but it does. And when you consider Owen Kramkowski's struggles in his last game, and I'm assuming he's going to be the starter against Coastal, I think that gives Coastal Carolina an edge, as much as I don't want to say it, and as much as I hope I'm wrong yet again. The other game in that bracket, that side of the bracket, I've got Oregon State beating Louisville, and then Arizona grinding out a tough win against Louisville in the losers bracket.
I agree.
I think Coastal beats Oregon State with their actual best pitcher, Jacob Morrison. And then for the third game, if Arizona holds Smith Bailey for their third game, if they have one, I think he'll pitch another solid game. They could change that up and put Smith in as a number two guy, depending on what happens. But I think he's going to pitch another solid game. But I think in that situation, the kind of table that I've set here, they play Oregon State, and I think Oregon State is just a little too good at the plate. I think the Beavers would eliminate Arizona, and then Coastal beats Oregon State to advance to the championship series.
I agree with everything you just said. Who you got in the other bracket? Arkansas?
Probably not a good sign that we agree, because usually when we both agree, we're both wrong.
Well, I hope so. I hope we're wrong, because that means Arizona go to the championship series.
We've been wrong about Arizona every step of the way so far, so hopefully that trend continues.
We have.
On the other side of the bracket, I think the winner of that first game between LSU and Arkansas advances, and I lean Arkansas in that game. Sure. I agree with Joe. I think he knows, he's followed these teams closely than I have, but I think Arkansas is the best team in the College World Series. I think they edge out UCLA. Arkansas does, to advance to the championship series. UCLA's been very dominant so far, so they could certainly make a run as well. And I agree with Joe. I think Arkansas beats Coastal Carolina in a very competitive, low-scoring 3-game series to win the national championship. However, if this, like I said on X, if this was a movie, Arizona would get payback against Coastal Carolina, and then they'd have a showdown against the villain Jay Johnson and LSU in the championship series.
That would be unbelievable.
And they beat them in like a tough 3. Like they lose the first game, and all hope seems lost, and then they win the last 2. If I was scripting it, that's how I would script it. But I don't get to make such decisions.
That would be unbelievable, Shane.
It would.
If that were to happen. But
yeah,
one game at a time. Hey, listen, the team's proven us wrong thus far. Keep doing it. I'm glad to be wrong. Glad to be wrong. And glad to own it.
Do you agree on the national championship?
I agree. Arkansas is the best team. I thought Tennessee would give them a run and take them to Game 3, and they didn't. And I thought UTSA would beat UCLA. So I think everything you said, and I hate to admit it, everything that you said were along the same lines. That means don't bet that because we're probably going to be wrong. Right. A couple of things I want to talk about. The House NIL settlement that went through last Friday, I don't really know what it means. I think a lot of people don't really know what it means.
Some people
Arizona released a statement saying, "Hey, we're ready for this. We're good."
Yeah.
What's your take on it?
Yeah, I chatted with Joe Healy a little bit afterwards about it because I didn't want to put him on the spot about NIL stuff because everyone's still trying to digest it. But he said kind of what you just did. And I'd like to have an expert on the show at some point to discuss in the near future to sort this all out. My first thought is this, if it goes into law, I'm sure there's going to be lawsuits. I think this is Desiree Reed-Francois' time to shine. The settlement allows schools to facilitate NIL deals directly, which is right up her alley. She's a branding and marketing expert, and that's something I think Arizona needs to improve upon. And I think she's off to a great start. She's encouraging players and coaches to be more active in the community, on social media, do more interviews. You saw the great video that the marketing team did as far as like all the night games the football team has to play, and that's a great marketing plan. I love putting together. I'm in communications and marketing, more on the communications side, but I respect that. So the other thing is Arizona doesn't have as many wealthy individual donors as a lot of other schools do, and I looked it up. At least according to Grok, and Grok is never wrong. 46% of NIL deals are generated through local businesses. So more partnerships there can help as well. On the face of it, the salary cap, I guess $20.5 million, it sounds like a nice way to level the playing field, but that's assuming Arizona can reach that threshold in the first place, not necessarily a given. So I won't pretend, again, that I understand the business side of it. I'm interested to talk to people who know a lot more about that than I do. But I think Desiree is uniquely positioned to help Arizona navigate this, and I'm happy that she's the athletic director at this moment in time as we have this big pivot in college sports.
We will talk more about this, obviously, going forward as more starts to come out about this. One thing that was just released, we're recording this on Tuesday afternoon, college basketball has implemented a coach's challenge. Mm-hmm. Similar to the NBA, you get one. If you have a timeout, great. Then if it's successful, then you get another one later in the game, assuming you have another timeout. Your thoughts on this? You like it, or does it slow down the game even more? And
we talked about this after the BYU game, the basketball game, where Arizona may have been able to use coach's challenge there to change the game because that was a very questionable call.
Very questionable.
Nice at the end of the game. Now the model they're using is the NBA's model where you have to have a timeout, so it wouldn't have mattered in that case anyway because Arizona was already out of timeouts in that game. But we did talk about it, so. I don't know. I mean, there's always a trade-off with, the speed of the game versus getting things right and slowing things down. I mean, like the NBA, it was already for a lot of people insufferable to watch the last few minutes of a game before all these challenges and automatic reviews about who the ball go off of came into place, and now you've got that in college basketball. So I guess it's a good thing as long as the reviews are prompt. There's no reason these should go 5 minutes. Maybe limit them to a minute, and if you don't see anything conclusive, then you come back and that's like you have put a time limit on it. I don't think there's anything like that in there, but I think that they're emphasizing the speed of it. The one thing I'm surprised they didn't do, because I felt like this was inevitable, was announced quarters for college.
Yeah, I really thought that was too, to be honest with you.
When I saw the media release, I clicked on it, and that's the first thing I expected to see, and I didn't see that in there unless I'm mistaken. So
no, I didn't see it either. I think it should happen, and we've discussed that, and we'll go over it once again if and when that is implemented. But Shane, what a show! Great job putting that one together. Thanks to Joe Healy, thanks to Mason White. Let's just hope. You never know. We didn't expect to be talking about baseball here on June 10th. Here we are, and let's hope we're talking about it again next week and the following week. It's exciting. So thanks to the baseball team for giving us a hell of a run. It's been great. So for Shane Dale, I'm Eric Cohen. Thanks for listening, and as always, bear down.